He sits with a stack of rail logs from a grey autumn week in 1974, every page a block of careful numbers. The station clock in each photo reads 18:12. The platform looks ordinary: coats, briefcases, breath in the cold. Only one thing will not settle. The duty sheet marks 2 whistles that minute, but only 1 engine is scheduled. Hey, I'm glad you made it. Before we start, we do 3 soft checks, our little ritual. 1, breathe in, slow, like you're fogging a window. 2, loosen your jaw. 3, thumb on the table, click the quiet key. Good. This is sleepy history horror. We don't scream here, we listen. I tell true stories like a late-night walk with a friend who notices the small stuff. Clocks, doors, ledgers, radio cards, the gentle proof that says what happened and when. Sometimes 2 honest things disagree, and that gap is our kind of horror. It's not jumpy, it's human. Around here, we keep house rules simple. Stay kind in the comments, stay curious with the details, and keep the volume low. If something feels heavy, we slow down. If a number won't add up, we check it together. When it finally makes sense, or refuses to, we let the paper have the last word. If you want a quiet corner online, make it this one. Hit subscribe, tell me what place we should walk next, and bring your own quiet key. Maybe it's a pen, a coin, or nothing at all. I'll start the clock, you make yourself comfortable, and we'll let the room speak first. Ready? Breathe, loosen, click. Let's begin. He starts at a narrow desk that smells faintly of oil and old paper. The desk lamp throws a warm circle on a cloth-bound ledger, its spine cracked, its lines ruled thin and straight. A brass tally clicker lies beside the folder, face frozen between 99 and 100, as if a thumb had paused mid-count and never pressed through. He flexes his hand once and opens to the week that matters. The platform marshal's handwriting is neat, almost careful enough to be slow. 18:12, downline local, signal given. Under it, in a smaller hand and a lighter ink, a tiny carré adds double tone. He underlines the words, then leaves the pencil balanced across the gutter like a small gate that won't quite stay open. From a manila envelope, he slides out contact prints. 3 angles of the same minute: coats, briefcases, damp wool, pale breath in the cold. At the platform edge, a man in a flat cap turns his head left, ready for a train that should not yet move. Farther down, a girl eats chips from a paper cone, steam lifting from the salt. In the background, a porter's cap tips toward the clock. The second whistle is not in any frame. Sound doesn't print. He tilts one photo to catch the gloss. The wall clock's minute hand kisses the 12. The second hand is a blur. A streak of drizzle clings to the lens, a grey stitch along the edge. He marks the vantage points on a scrap, kiosk, pillar, shelter, and notes how no one seems alarmed, only expectant, the quiet of a platform that knows its own routine. The clicker draws his eye again. He lifts it, presses once. It won't advance. He shakes it gently and hears a dry rattle, like sand in a small jar. He sets it back down, facing up, the almost 100, staring like an unfinished thought. The marshal's note, double tone, sits beside it, steady as a challenge. He breathes fog onto the lamp's brass shade without meaning to and wipes it with his cuff. The desk's wood is worn smooth where other wrists have rested. He writes on a clean card, 18:12, 1 whistle scheduled. Below that, second tone claimed, no image. He pins the card to the folder tab so it can't be ignored. He turns the page and pauses, listening to the room. Even alone, the station seems to hum inside the paper. Steam somewhere, a door somewhere, a cough swallowed by stone. He closes his hand over the pencil and decides the next step. Find the device that counted bodies and see if its numbers also heard what the film did not. He walks to the box of service cards, a shoebox of a different kind, thin, dog-eared rectangles stamped with grease. Exit B has its own stack. The first card he pulls is dated that morning. Lubricate pivot, inspect Powell spring. The mechanic's block letters are wide and blunt, a handwriting that looks like it wears gloves. A pencil diagram shows the ratchet, teeth like little mountains, the Powell resting on a peak. At the bottom, an odd line. Counter shows +1 after last egress. Arm free. No jam found. He frowns and sets the card beside the ledger. The evening flow should be clean. Outs only, counted by a mechanical register the size of a matchbox. Each shove of the arm turns 2 tiny number wheels with a comforting clack. He has heard that clack all his life in stations and shops, a sound that promises certainty. A +1 that won't clear means the register thinks a body went out when no one did, or that someone did, unseen. He unsnaps the next card. Rechecked after 18 nay. Counter still +1. Teeth good. Spring tension good. Applied graphite. Beneath it, a small smear where rain got in and the pencil swam. He can almost feel the mechanic's patience thinning. The card ends with the same sentence that bothers him twice now. No jam found. He copies the phrase onto his own note and underlines it, not for drama, but to make the stubbornness visible. At the bottom of the stack is a photograph, rare for a turnstile. The frame catches exit B from the attendant's side, the iron arm, the nickel-plated hub, the little glass window that reveals the register's numbers. Through the window, the pair of wheels show an odometer face ending in 7. On the back, a scribble. Should have read 6. He looks for a reflection, a shadow, anything that would explain, but the background is only tile and the curve of a stair. He writes the time sequence in a clean column. 18:10, old announced. 18:11, PA made. 18:12, double tone heard. 18:13, exit B's count remains. +1 past last seen egress. He draws a thin line from the +1 to the second tone, refusing to name the link, just mapping it. Numbers are better than hunches. Even so, the line looks like a suggestion he's not supposed to follow. He flips to the older cards, looking for precedent. Twice in 10 years, the counter stuck at +1 during bad weather, once in fog, once in sleet, and both times the cause was physical. A bent tooth, a wad of ticket chaff jammed under the paw. Both times the fix was visible, almost friendly. Here, every part is declared sound. The arm turns, the Powell drops, the wheels advance, the math does not. He takes the small inspection key from the envelope, a brass slug that trainers use to test the mechanism without a body. At the spare assembly on the shelf, he slots the key and pushes the arm once, feeling the Powell lift and fall, the faint thrill of the register ticking over. He watches the wheels settle and hears his own breath in the quiet. Then he notes something so small it would be easy to shrug off. The instant after the arm returns, the wheels quiver, as if a late, sympathetic nudge tried to catch them. On his card he writes, "After tremor," then adds, "or second impulse." He closes the turnstile file and places it under the ledger, aligning their corners until both look squared and ordinary. They are not. 1 minute in a week, 1 click too many, 1 note too soft. 3 small things that should cancel each other have begun to rhyme. He caps his pen and decides the next source, the station master's watch against the wall clock and the newsreel that caught them both in the same breath. He threads a short reel onto the viewer, fingers finding the muscle memory of sprockets and leader. The bulb warms, the gate clicks, and the image shivers into place. Kiosk on the left, pillar on the right, drizzle stitched across the frame. A news cameraman had stood here for colour, commuters in coats, breath turning to fog, the platform clock a steady witness. The minute hand leans into the 12. The second hand is a grey smear, hurrying in place. The station master enters from the far edge, coat dark with rain, hat brim shining. He pauses under the clock and produces a silver pocket watch, thumb on the crown. He holds it up where both faces, his and the wall's, will fit in one glance. He taps the glass once with a fingernail, that small authority in motion, and then lowers it, satisfied or resigned. On film, the difference looks the same. He rolls the reel back 4 seconds and lets it play with sound. The optical track is soft and grainy, but the room comes through. A murmur like polite water, shoes whispering, a paper folded and creased. From somewhere close, a guard gives one short, clean note on a whistle, crisp, center cut, the kind of sound brass makes when rules are followed. Heads turn lightly, not in alarm, only in attention. Half a heartbeat later, a second tone arrives from down the platform, thin, breath-frayed at the edges, as if pushed through a narrow seam. It rides the crowd noise like a thread that never quite catches the cloth. He stops the reel, feels the warm hum of the viewer in his wrists and rewinds to the same 2 notes. Again. First, a clear cut. Then a soft answer that won't square with distance or metal. He lowers the volume and listens once more. Without the crowd's wash, the second sound reveals itself as almost human, more lung than brass, more sigh than signal. The attack is late, the pitch a shade low, the decay fuzzy, like air leaking through a valve that was never meant for voice. He writes on his card, 1812-07, primary attention. 1812-08, unregistered tone, off-key, breathy. He freeze frames on the station master at the instant between notes. The man's head tilts, not much, just enough to say his ear caught it. His mouth tightens by a line. He does not lift an arm or call. He only listens, the way someone listens to a sound they cannot place but have heard before. On the bench behind him, a boy pauses with a chip halfway to his mouth. A porter glances without moving his feet. He advances 5 frames. A faint flicker wobbles along the bottom of the image, the telltale jitter of a camera catching a vibration in the floor. Somewhere, a small weight touched iron and left. He marks the frame numbers, then lets the reel run to its end. Umbrellas, collars, the slow, patient rhythm of a platform that believes it knows itself. The second tone leaves no face to attach to, no hand, no sleeve. He powers down the viewer and writes a plain sentence he trusts more than the adjectives crowding behind it. 2 tones recorded within a single held minute. Second, not consistent with issued whistles. He adds a second line he dislikes, but keeps for completeness. Station master appears to hear both. Then he sets the watch moment beside the ledger and the turnstile count. 3 small pieces lean toward the same minute, as if 1812 kept an extra breath that no schedule wanted. He opens the folder stamped Way and Works, Anomalies. Inside are thin job cards, each with a small smear of rain and graphite. Mid-stack, he finds the one that nags the day. Downline platform. Mark at 9 car stop. Chair loose. Tighten after service. A thumbprint has pressed the word after darker. The stamp in the corner reads the date, then nothing. No crew initials, no done. The photo clipped to the card is close and plain. A white X chalked on the web of the rail, right above a chair where the iron sits on its wooden sleeper. You can see the chair key proud by a hair, no more than a fingernail's thickness, but enough to make someone prudent leave a mark. Rain freckles the metal. Grit collects in the gap like pepper. He traces the X with his eyes the way a fitter might with a glove. Around the mark, the platform stones show a day's story. A heel lands half on the chalk, half off, turned slightly as if the person twisted mid-step to look back. 3 other partial turns sit in a loose spiral. An eddy, not a panic, like people stepping aside for someone passing who never quite arrives. He marks their positions on a scrap sketch, small arcs of attention in a square yard. He reads the morning inspection line by line. Sound chair, keys set, smear oil on fishplate bolts. Then the addendum, penciled in a different hand at midday. Key at 9 car, tap in tonight. A fitter has drawn a tiny square, the chair, and a wedge, the key, with one arrow showing tap, another check gauge. Nothing here would stop a train, but a proud key can talk to a train, a click underweight, a small voice in iron that carries farther than people think. He checks the call log for the ground crew. The names are there, penciled and crossed through as shifts hand over. At 1640, weather holds. At 1755, boiler pressure high, vent open. At 1820, the line is blank until 1830 when someone writes, cleared water off pit. No one signs for the 9-car tap before the rush. Not neglect, just the way an ordinary day moves its jobs down the bench when rain starts and hands are already full. He lines up what he has, the chalk X that should have become a hollow thunk and a fast fix with a hammer. The spiral of foot turns near it, the faint camera jitter at the exact second between two notes. The turnstiles plumps one that would not clear. He doesn't dress them up. He only writes, iron touched by something small around 1812, and underlines small. He pulls a spare chair key from the bottom of the drawer. A training piece, square and simple, the kind that wedges the rail tight in its chair. He holds it to his lower lip and blows across the notch without thinking why. The sound that comes is thin and breath-frayed, not music, not metal, just air finding a narrow way through. He stops, sets the key down, and feels foolish for the second it takes to write what the ear already knows. A gap can make a note. He tucks the anomaly card behind the ledger, so the chalk X sits beside the double tone and the frozen 099 clicker. 3 different media, 1 minute. The repairs will be logged tomorrow. Tonight, he needs the order of that minute as spoken, not seen. He reaches for the grey spool with the operator's label and turns to the dispatch tape, where someone says exactly what should have happened, and the minute refuses to agree. He threads the grey dispatch spool onto the Revox and waits for the soft hiss that means the heads are clean. The leader ticks past, then the operator's voice arrives, flat, steady, tea-warm. 1810, announce and hold for weather delay. A relay clicks once, pencil scratches in some other room. Then the line goes quiet the way a library goes quiet, on purpose, not empty. He notes it against the ledger. A hold at 1810 means no motion order at 1812. On the film that matches the faces, the small shift of weight toward the speaker grill, scarves pulled closer, no one edging for a jump. He lets the tape roll. A guard answers, hold acknowledged platform 9, with the clipped certainty of someone who has said the same words for years and means them every time. The PA log sheet in his folder shows the announcer's script at 1811:15. Downline service holds for weather. Remain behind the line. The handwriting is large and even, letters that do not rush. He copies the time. The wall clock in the reel kisses the 12. The room tone on the tape fattens. Rain on tin, boiler breathing, a cough caught and smothered. He rewinds 3 seconds and hears a faint breath on the open line. No word, just air, like a handset lifted near a sleeve and set back down. He pencils a small tick on the margin and writes, unclaimed pickup. It isn't unusual, it is simply there, inside the same minute that will not sit still. He shifts to the whistle book, thin as a catechism. Codes are simple, 1 short for attention, 2 for start, long for stop. The page for that day has a single note in the guard's pencil, double tone heard before release. He draws a line from the 1810 hold to that margin note and stops the line in mid-air. A hold should keep whistles quiet. A second tone has no business showing up. He plays 1812 5 times. First, the station's own short, crisp cut. Attention, not start. Then a beat late, a second tone, thinner, breath-frayed, lower than brass wants to be. He lowers the volume and listens again. Without the wash of the platform, the second sound is almost a person, air pushed through a narrow place. He writes his summary plain. Order to hold given at 1810, PA at 1811:15, one attention cut at 1812, second unregistered tone at 1812 +1. Below it, a question he hates for its vagueness, but keeps because it belongs here more than comfort does. Who answered, and to what? He caps the pen, lets the tape spin down, and turns to the only record left that promises names, places, and times in one breath, the pocket notebooks of the platform guards. He lifts the thin stack of pocket notebooks, oil-dark covers that fit a palm, elastic-tired, edges furred from coats and rain. Each belongs to a guard by initials pressed in the corner. He sorts by week and finds 3 for the day in question, JW, RK, and one spare book with no initials, the kind the office hands out when someone forgets theirs. JW's pages are neat, each entry boxed and timed. 1740, relief tea. 1758, boil event noisy. 1810, hold received. At 1812, he finds what he expects and nothing else. 18N cut. No flourish, no comment. The pencil pressure is even. The loop on the T looks like all the others. He taps the margin and lets the book rest open. RK's script leans forward, quick but legible. Stand 9, the top line says, underlined once, as if to remind a future reader where the boot stood. 1810, hold. Then a small square, his personal mark for public address made. At 1812, he writes something he cannot quite pass at first. 2 short slashes like fence posts and then the word echo. He brings the page close. Not echo, he decides. Answer. 2 slashes, then answer. He circles it lightly and writes on his own card. RK hears reply. He opens the unmarked spare. The first half of the book is blank. The back third contains rough notes from earlier weeks, borrowed, then returned to the drawer. In the middle, 3 pages hold the day he needs. The hand is different, rounder, a little hesitant, as if the writer was new to the rhythm of noting and glancing up. 17:55, rain heavier. 18:03, Bluecoat asks how long, told him. 18:10, hold. Then a pause of white. On the next line, 1812, whistle, mine not. The dash after whistle looks like a thought stepping from one stone to the next and not quite making the gap. He flips the book over to the inside cover, where guards sometimes tuck reminders. There, in pencil so light it could vanish with one careless thumb, someone has written a small scale of notes, C, D, E, F, G, with tiny arrows up and down. Beside G, issue. Beside F, old. He thinks of brass pipes, 2 whistles in a drawer, one approved, one retired, pitches a step apart. He turns to the equipment sheet and finds the line. Spare whistle issued to RK 1720, original sticky in rain. At 1905, the same line shows original cleaned, spare returned. The boxes in between are empty. He checks the signature page for that day. JW signs out at 1910 with a firm, practiced surname. RK signs at 1912 straight and simple. A third signature space is left blank, a place reserved for a trainee or relief who never wrote their name. He traces the box but does not darken it. A blank is not a fact, it is only the shape where one might have gone. He returns to RK's answer and the spares, mine not. 2 guards heard 2 things, one the cut he gave, One, the reply, he didn't. He writes a plain pair of lines. Only one issued whistle in use at 1812, second tone, not from guard on 9. Under it, a smaller thought he lets stand because it belongs to the minute, not to theory. Someone else carried air through a narrow place. He closes the books and sits a moment with the small human traces, the tea at 1740, the blue coat asking how long, the pencil practice of a scale inside a cover. The second tone is still without a face, but it has lost one owner. He slides the notebooks under the ledger and turns to the last source that treats sound as writing, a maintenance man's report on pipes and vents, places where breath can become instrument without trying. He opens the maintenance ledger for plant and pipework, a heavier book, its pages speckled with rust blooms where damp thumbs rested. The first entry that matters is simple as a shrug. 1755, boiler pressure high, vent opened. He draws a small square around vent and turns the page to the diagram fold-out, a ghost map of thin lines, steam mains, condensate returns, reliefs, threading under the concourse like veins. A penciled route shows the boiler room's relief pipe running up through a brick chase and out beneath the station fascia, its last elbow pointing toward platform 9. Someone has written tin cowl at the termination, then scratched it out and replaced it with galv. Another note, cowl flaps loose, tie when dry. He taps the margin. The word when in a station file always hides the weather. He checks the day's rounds card. The fitter on the evening walk wrote, vent cracked half, the customary setting when rain makes the rooms sweat. At 1820, the same hand notes, cleared water off pit. That leaves a window, a partially opened relief, a wet evening and a funnel of metal facing the platform during the minute that will not sit still. He draws a straight line of thought and tests it the way you test a coin on your teeth. Steam vents breathe, but they do not whistle unless given a reed or a skin. He flips to a second folder labelled Roofworks Fascia. Inside, a ticket for loose, flashing above 9, 3 weeks old. The crew tacked with 2, meant to return on a dry day to finish with 4. The photo shows a strip of tin lifted at one end like a page turned by the wind. He lays the fascia photo over the vent diagram and sees the possibility. Vent breath meeting a loose edge, the edge speaking back in a thin, uncertain pitch. He walks the length in his head, the hot breath rising from the boiler room, turning once through the brick, again through the elbow, then washing over a ragged lip in the rain. He remembers the off-key note on the reel, lower than the issue whistle, frayed at the edges like air snagging. On his card he writes, vent plus loose edge, сейчас tone, then adds, variable with wind. He wants something more than a hunch. In the drawer of oddments he finds a length of copper off-cut, 2 elbows, and a battered cone from a long-dead megaphone. He fits a crude path together on the bench, angles the cone like a cowl, and blows. The first try is nothing but breath. He narrows his mouth and sends a steady stream. The cone answers with a thin, tired note, not a whistle, not a pipe, just a long, tinny line of sound that wavers if he shifts his wrist. He stops, embarrassed in an empty room, and writes anyway. Air on edge, sings. He returns to pitch. The spare notebook's inside cover had a pencil scale, G labelled issue, F labelled old. On the tape, the second tone sat low, late, a shade below the guard's cut. He fishes a tuning fork from the stationery tin, E, the office oddity used to check the humming mains. He strikes it against the desk, holds it near the cone, and finds the edge note slides beneath the fork's clean ring into the slack between E and F when he changes the angle. Not proof, a rhyme. He checks one more page in the boiler book, 1812, Stoker on hand, vent steady. The time catches his eye. The stoker's pencil adds, odd tremor through casing, heavy foot or water drop. He thinks of the camera's jitter in the frames between the two notes, and of the spiral of turned feet near the chalk X. Things are touching iron. He closes the plant ledger and stacks it with the others, ledger, turnstile, reel, notebooks, now pipes, and writes the sentence he trusts because it is plain. A breath source exists near 9 that can sing without brass. Under it, a quieter thought. Breath needs a cue. He underlines cue once. If a vent made the tone, what told it when? He reaches for the signal hut papers where levers, wires and human hands pull time tight enough to feel. He spreads the signal hut papers like a map, lever charts, interlocking tables, the block register with its neat ruled columns, time, from, to, code, meaning. Platform 9's home signal sits under lever 12, its starter is 14. The interlocking table makes it plain, with a hold active, 14 cannot clear. Brass or no brass rules sit heavier than habit. The bell codes are printed at the top margin the way prayers hang over a door. 1 beat for call attention, 2 pause. 1 means is line clear, 2 pause 2 line clear. 3 short in a hurry, train on line. He runs a finger over each as if touching them could make the sounds again. In the days column, 1809 shows a tidy 1 attention. At 1810 the leverman writes 2-1 is line clear to the next box down the line, then crosses it once and notes hold. No 2-2 follows, no clearance is given. He checks the lever frame log, each movement gets a stroke of pencil. 12 held at danger, 14 locked by 12. At 1811 the leverman writes repeat, hold to platform. It's not formal, just a courtesy line, reminder to the guard that nothing will move. The levers stay put. The frame sketch shows them sleeping in the red, the way steel waits without asking. He turns to the small side book that huts keep for nuisances, stuck needles, sluggish indicators, bells with character. The day's entry at 1812 is brief but odd. Single beat came through without ring, felt tap on box. He brings the page close. The leverman has underlined without ring. A bell can be sounded by the magnet or by a knuckle. Both leave a mark in the hand, but only one leaves the coil warm. He presses 2 fingers to his own desk and thinks of the camera's floor jitter, the stoker's odd tremor through casing, the spiral of turned feet by the chalk X. Iron touched iron. He checks the battery record for the block apparatus. The needle drift chart shows no dip around 1812. The cells are steady. The tap the leverman felt didn't come by wire. He looks at the hut plan and finds the bell box bolted to the same timber that takes the signal wires down toward the platform. A weight on the wire can talk to wood. He follows the signal run on the diagram, from lever 14's dogleg under the walk, along a row of pulleys, then up near the fascia where the roofwork showed a loose tin lip. He draws a thin pencil line in the margin. Wire, pulley, timber, bell. If water pooled in the run or a foot nudged a low span, the wire could shiver enough to kiss the bell's armature. Not a ring, just a hello. He flips the block register again and notes the leverman's last line for that minute. No clear given, repeat hold. The handwriting is firmer, as if the man wrote it twice on purpose, to sit heavier on the page. Whatever touched the wire in the box didn't change the law of the levers. The starter stayed at danger. The schedule stayed still. Only the minute moved and it took a thin sound with it. He writes 2 sentences he trusts because they have corners. No release issued at 1812. Mechanical transmission near 9 experienced a physical tap. Below them he sketches the run of wire, the bell box, and a little wave where a pulley sits nearest the fascia. He does not claim that wave made a note. He only draws it where the wind and vent and loose edge live, and where the leverman felt a bell that did not belong. He pulls the witness cards, thin slips with penciled lines clipped together by a rusted bulldog. Most are calm, even in memory. Wet evening. Delay announced. People patient. He sorts by position. Near the kiosk, a porter who heard the short toot, and then a softer one like someone blowing across a bottle. At the bench, a boy who lost count of rivets at the whistle. By the 9-car mark, a woman with a paper cone of chips who thought the wind sang through the roof. None give a face to the second tone, they give the minute texture. He lays out the 3 contact prints again, this time hunting not for the missing sound but for small human tilts. In the first frame, the flat cap man by the edge is mid-glance left. In the second, his head is still left, but his shoulders have made a micro-correction, the kind that follows a sound coming from not quite where you expect. In the third, his jaw tightens a notch. He marks the alignment with a grease pencil, 3 ticks that lean, then hold. He studies the chip girl. Steam lifts from the cone in threads. At the first whistle she pauses. At the second, the steam thread kinks as if her hand jolted a centimetre. He magnifies the corner where her knuckles show, pale crescents, salt flecks. On the stone near her shoe, a rain bead catches a tremor line the camera also caught, a ripple that runs toward the rail and dies at iron. He turns to the porter's card. The handwriting is careful, letters tall. Sounded like blowing across a bottle, the man wrote, then added, but longer, like someone steady at it. The word steady pleases him. It matches the stoker's vent steady, the leverman's felt tap, the camera's even jitter. Ordinances of small persistence. He underlines steady once and copies the phrase to his MasterCard of echoes. He checks the card filed for blue coat, asked how long. The guard's spare book mentioned him. Here, the witness writes, was asking when we'd go. Then he raised his head like he heard something behind him and said, that's not ours. A sentence that makes him stop. He reads it again, scans for flourish. The hand is plain, the tone practical. The man didn't say ghost. He said, not ours, which is how railway men label the world. Issue, not issue, ours, not ours, clear, not clear. He looks for anyone who claims an engine sighting. No one does. One card says, thought I saw smoke, then crosses out smoke and writes breath. Another says, felt the floor go light, which could be nothing more than a body shifting. A woman notes a bell that didn't ring, and he smiles without amusement. He has that bell in a margin already. The minute is writing the same words on different desks. He stacks the cards and writes a sentence he trusts for its lack of drama. Attentions turned toward 9. Second tone acknowledged as not issue by at least one witness. No visual corroboration of stock in motion. Beneath it, a smaller human addendum. Girl's steam kinked at second tone. He lets the oddness of that live beside the iron language. He keeps one card out, unsigned, thin, written in a round school hand. I heard a whistle and another whistle, it says, and then I counted to 10 and nothing came. He reads it twice, hears the count in his head, and sets it atop the stack, like a paper weight. The minute stayed held. The second tone visited and left like weather. He turns to the last paper he has avoided, the incident book for near misses, the place where platforms admit almosts. He opens the maroon ledger stamped Incident Near Miss, the one offices keep for the things that don't rise to reportable but won't sit quiet either. The day's page carries a row of tidy dashes like fence posts. At 17:58, pram wheel caught at platform join, assisted, no injury. At 18:06, roof sing noted during squall, advised works. He boxes roofsing once. The phrasing matches a fitter's ear more than a clerk's. At 1810, a guard has logged the hold for the benefit of the book, belt and braces. Beneath it, 1812 earns two short lines that do not agree. The first, passenger query, why whistle if held, told none moving. The second, same minute, different hand. Thin tone heard near 9. Wind. The question mark skews right, as if the writer wanted it to lean on something sturdier. He scans the margin notes. A porter adds, little one stepped over line, back behind. No alarm bells, no fuss, only the soft choreography platforms practice every day. Another line in the Leverman square hand says, tap felt on bell box, no code received. He underlines felt, a word that keeps visiting from different desks. He flips back a week to check for cousins of the same nuisance. 3 days earlier, vent sings when cracked, angle with wind, paired with roof edge loose, sound like bottle. A month back, bell tick in timber when rain heavy, wire damp. The entries do not claim a ghost. They mutter about breath and edges and wires that talk to wood when the weather invites them. He returns to the 1812 lines and follows them with the tip of his pencil into the white below, waiting to see if his hand wants to invent. It doesn't. The book stays plain. Query, tone, wind, tap, child, each word a small weight on the same minute. He writes on his card, multiple desks acknowledge a sound not tied to clearance. Staff behavior remains hold normal. He checks the tiny addendum space at the bottom where night staff log what they find after crowds thin. 2 items from the concourse by exit B are listed. Paper cone, chips intact, binned, and single metal washer, 1-2, wet, tray. He copies washer, exit B, not because a washer explains a tone, but because loose metal and a ratchet love each other too well. The turnstile counter said +1 and no jam found. A washer could kiss a pal without marrying it. He lays the washer note beside the spiral of foot turns near the chalk X, the camera's floor tremor, the leverman's bell tap, the stoker's vent steady, and the porter's bottle simile. Nothing contradicts, nothing closes. He writes a sentence the minute keeps insisting on. Air and iron took notice of each other at 1812. He closes the near-miss book and looks toward the drawer where night things end up, the lost property tray with its patient screws, gloves and slips. If the counter near exit B claimed a body, the tray might admit a trace. He turns to it next, hunting for anything small enough to ride a mechanism and leave only the sound of leaving behind. He slides open the shallow drawer labelled Lost, Found, Concourse, the wood sticking for the first inch, then giving with a soft sigh. Inside, objects wait in paper sleeves and grease pencil squares, a single kid's mitten, 2 bus tokens fused by damp, a book of stamps gone to waves. In the front corner sits a jelly jar quarter full of hardware the station refuses to confess to, pins, screws, split rings, anonymous washers the colour of old tea. The day's chit stack lies clipped beneath a bulldog. He reads the lines that match his minute. 1822, cone, chips intact, B bench, disposed. 1824, washer, 1-2, exit, B floor, wet. 1831, umbrella, green, kiosk. He slides the washer sleeve free. Inside is a flat ring, not bright, with one edge polished more than the other, as if it had lived against something that moved. He sets it on the desk, spins it once. It wobbles and settles with a sound like a coin that doesn't want to be money. He holds it beside the photograph of exit B's register window. The match is not proof, only kinship. The washer's outer diameter not so far from the Powell's sweep. Its inner hole a size the turnstile's spindle might know. He imagines it under a shoe, lifted and carried to the arm, riding one turn like a passenger who doesn't pay, then sliding off into the wet. He writes on his card, "Washer could kiss Powell." Second impulse. Then underlines, "could," because stations are full of coulds that never happen and one that does, and one that... He checks the back of the sleeve for the hand that wrote the find. Porter T, kiosk, a tidy initial. The time matches the moment after the held minute, when people began to settle and notice what lay at their feet. He turns to the porter's witness card, the bottle note, and adds a small arrow between bottle and washer, not to claim causation, only to keep the two within reach of each other on the desk. He tips the jelly jar into his palm and sorts the rest. 2 ticket eyelets, a split pin bent like a hair, a sliver of tin with a nail hole, sharp at one corner. He holds the tin to the lamp. The edge sings a dry, high nothing when he breathes across it. He thinks of the roof lip and the vent and sets the sliver beside that folder, making another quiet rhyme in metal. At the bottom of the drawer, a square of blotting paper hides a stubby pencil and a folded note, probably used to label something returned. He opens it anyway out of habit. Inside is only a single line in an office hand. "Keep smalls together, no loose in mechanisms." He smiles without humour. The station tells itself its commandments in lowercase. He lists the drawer on his MasterCard. Washer, 12, exit B, wet, 1824, tin sliver, roofkin, no time. Then a plain line across the page, and beneath it the sentence he trusts now because it has earned company, small metal, present where counting and breath meet. He caps his pen and looks toward the concourse itself, not on paper, but in stone and iron, where a man with a torch can crouch below 9 and hear how the building breathes after hours. That is where the next answer lives if it wants to. He waits until the concourse empties to mop water, an echo, then takes the caretaker's keys and a torch that hums like a bee. The platform wears its wet in long, dull streaks. At 9 he kneels by the chalk that should be gone and isn't, an X still faint on the rail web, boots having worried it from bright to ghost. The chair key is flush now, someone tapped it true after the rush. He touches the iron anyway and feels the day's cold stored inside. He drops to the trackbed where ballast crunches quietly and the world turns into timber and wire. The signal run for 14 passes under him, galvanized strand looped over pulleys, each wheel a small harbour for water. He flicks a finger to set one turning. The wire hums once, faint as a coin on a tabletop. Up in the hut, a bell arm would not ring at that, but a box could remember. He angles the torch along the fascia. The loose tin lip the works ticket promised looks back. 2 fresh tacks bit in, the far corner still proud by a finger's width, enough to take a breath and argue with it. Beyond, the boiler vent's cowl weeps a bead that gathers, fattens, then lets go. He listens as it falls through dark, hits something taut, and travels as a fizz along iron. A note is only a distance with an opinion. He climbs the service stair to the boiler corridor, opens the small steel door, and lets out heat that smells of rope and old tea. The relief is cracked half, as the rounds card said. He squares his shoulders to the cowl and blows across the slot the way a boy tests a bottle. The corridor answers with a tired, uncertain line of sound, late to start, reluctant to stop, slipping a shade low if he moves an inch. He hates how close it comes to the reel's second tone. He writes too near in his head and does not put it on paper. Back at 9 he stands where the flat-cap man stood and counts a steady 10, the way the unsigned witness did. The station is a body now, vents breathing, drains sipping, far batteries ticking their patient chemistry. He waits for anything to name itself. On 8, something small, metal on metal, clicks in exit B as if a Paul remembered a visitor and sighed about it. He crouches by the turnstile housing, ear close to its nickel skin. The register window is dark. The numbers sleep where they should. He taps the hub lightly with a key. A sympathetic tremor runs out along the concourse and returns through the floor in a single shiver he can feel in his knees. He can believe a man at a bellbox wrote "felt" and meant exactly this. He chalks nothing new. He only draws a tiny arrow on his private card. Vent, lip, wire, box, floor, feet. Then he crosses the arrow out because arrows promise more than nights like this can give. He pockets the card and stands, the torch throwing a long, soft blade across the waiting rails. The minute that would not settle has left its shape in places, not proofs, a breath that can sing, a wire that can answer, a counter that can dream of +1. He chooses the last desk left, the morning with trains moving on time, to see if the shape returns when no one is listening for it. He returns at first light when the station smells of wet stone and bread. Trains come like promises kept, on the quarter, on the half, steel speaking plainly over chairs newly tapped true. At platform 9 the chalk X is gone under a neat bruise of fresh oil. The fascia lip now sits flat, 4 tacks bright as teeth. A works note lies under a clip. Edge secured, vent inspected, no further sing. He copies the phrasing without agreeing. He asks the leverman for a spare stool and parks beside the frame. Lever 12 holds at danger, lever 14 waits locked, everything moving, to a code that fits on one line of paper and rules a mile of iron. The bell sounds through properly now. Attention, line clear, train on line, the tidy catechism of a healthy block. He watches the pencil trail itself, times, codes, initials, little squares that mean "saw it myself." At 9, JW is back on duty with a fresh book. His first entry, 0758, vent quiet. His second, 0812, ATN cut, depart. Nothing odd, no fence post slashes, no answer. He blows the issue whistle once to settle a crowd edge and points a pram's wheel away from the line with 2 fingers and a nod. When the starter clears, 2 shorts follow in their proper way, and the local slides out clean, all faces forward, nobody turning, as if a sound came from behind them. He stands where the chip girls stood and looks for the small tells, steam kinks, shoulder ticks, little ripples in puddles that want to be called tremors. Morning gives him none. The camera he doesn't have would have shown only hats, collars, a paper folded and read in order. He feels foolish for the comfort this brings and writes "Control Day Ordinary" in small letters because the relief belongs on the page, not just in the chest. He checks exit B between flows. The register sits true. The Powell drops with a friendly snick. The wheels advance and stop without quiver. He flicks the arm once with the inspector's key and waits, listening for that afterthought tremor he heard last night. Nothing follows. A porter has lined the floor tray with newspaper to catch washers before they become stories. The jelly jar holds steady at a count he noted in pencil and underlined. He steps into the boiler corridor. The relief is cracked where it should be. The cowl breathes without voice. He cups his hand and blows across the slot like a child trying again to make a bottle sing. It refuses with morning temperance. He writes "vent mute" in dry air and adds the weather for the record. Clear, little wind. By 0910 the block shows the rhythm of a good day. No cross-outs, no question marks. He asks the leverman lightly if bells ever tick without ring when rain leaves and sun arrives. The man shrugs the way men who live with wire shrug. "Wood moves," he says, and taps the box twice, knuckles firm, bell answering properly to each. He copies "wood moves" exactly as spoken, because sometimes that is the only sane sentence in a file. He gathers his cards, ledger, turnstile, reel, notebooks, pipe and fascia, bell and wire, washer and lip, and writes the line that earns its plainness by surviving both nights. At 18:12 yesterday, with a hold in force, a second tone was heard. Near 9, not issued by staff, morning replication with trains and repairs did not produce it. Then he leaves a small square of white under the sentence, on purpose, for the thing the minute will not give him and may never owe. He returns to the stack not by subject, but by calendar, sliding out the weekly sheets that share a weekday, with the minute that will not sit still. Thursdays in autumn carry their own weather. Commuters in heavier coats, vents worked a little harder, roofs given more to say. He copies the headings, week 41, week 42, week 43. The stubborn one is week 44. Week 41 reads like a station that minds its manners. 18:12, hold for late connection, no whistle. Exit counts line up. The bell codes march neat. Week 42 shows a drizzle symbol in the corner, the station master's private shorthand. The near-miss book that week notes, roof edge, whispers, in squall, works informed. No one writes, answer. No one adds, double tone. He draws a straight pencil down the 18:12 column and finds only routine. Week 43 offers one small nuisance, boiler vent cracked half, slight sing if door propped. The fitter adds, shut door, sing stops. The fix is almost comic in its simplicity, the kind of domestic solution buildings respect. Again, nothing sits beside 18:12 but ordinary attention cuts and the small drift of human questions about how long. He opens week 44, the week in question, and forces himself to read around the minute, not at it. 17:58 pram assisted, 18:06 roof sing noted, 18:10 announce and hold. The shape is familiar until it isn't. At 18:12 the quiet second line arrives in multiple hands. Answer, thin tone, wind. He copies each noun without their question marks and puts them in a row that looks like a list of instruments learning their names. He flips the lever frame log for that month and runs his finger across the pencil that tracks lever 14. Most days the dogleg sleeps when told and wakes only to a clean code. Only week 44 shows two tiny hesitations where the pencil faintly deepens at 18:12, as if the man's hand paused with the thought of motion and then did not move. He writes hesitation marks in the margin and underlines it once, not to imply intention, only to keep the texture. He checks the pocket notebooks for Thursdays a month earlier. RK still underlines stand 9, still boxes his PA, still marks weather with a small diagonal like rain drawn by a child. JW still writes T at the same minute with the same tidy loop. Only the spare notebook, borrowed that week by a relief, carries a cousin to the later page. Mine not. Written once in a corner and rubbed nearly out by a thumb. He circles the ghost and leaves it a ghost. He sits back and writes a plain pair of lines because the pattern refuses grander language. Across 4 Thursdays 18:12 behaves. On the 5th, with rain, small looseness, and a vent half open, a second tone appears in multiple records. Beneath it he adds smaller to keep himself honest. Second tone depends on more than weather. It depends on the station having the exact conversation with itself that day. He closes the weekly sheets and turns to the last box he has not touched, the clerk's tray of unsent memos and draft notices, the place where a building first tries to speak to itself on paper and sometimes changes its mind. He opens the shallow metal tray labelled drafts, hold, the one clerk's feed when words aren't ready to stand in the hall. The top sheet is a notice half-born, to all guards regarding non-issue tones during holds. Then a pause of white and a penciled X, clerk's way of saying not today. He turns it over. On the back, a trial sentence. If you hear a reply to attention with no release, do not assume clearance. He copies it because common sense sometimes needs a suit. Beneath, a memo to Works sits with two versions fighting. The first, secure fascia above 9 at earliest convenience. The second, added below in the same hand after the week in question. Secure fascia above 9 before next Thursday. He underlines before a word with teeth. Someone felt the station argue with itself and decided to end the conversation early next time. A third draft is stranger. A form letter meant for the public address box, never sent. During weather holds, unfamiliar sounds may occur from plant and roof works. These do not indicate train movement. He reads it twice, imagining the voice in the grill making the station smaller by explaining it. The line is true and useless. Platforms believe whistles even when told not to. He paperclips it to the stack anyway, a record of someone trying to domesticate a minute. He finds a carbon copy of a note to the lever huts. Report any bell ticks without ring, as and when. In the margin, the leverman from week 44 has answered in pencil. Tick felt 1812. No code. Repeated. Hold. The clerk hasn't yet typed the reply, but a ghost of it lives in a faint ribbon test at the bottom. Acknowledged. He likes the small, bureaucratic mercy of that word. Near the tray's back lies a scrap pared from a larger sheet, a private sum in a private hand. Vent, plus, lip, plus, wire. Hold, tone. The slash under wire darkens, then lightens, as if the writer hesitated at claiming math for weather and wood. He adds his own question mark to the MasterCard, but does not double it. The building keeps offering the same variables. It refuses the equation. He lifts one last draft, onion skin thin, dated the morning after. Incident, audible anomaly during hold, no movement, no harm. The text stops mid-line, then resumes lower in a cooler tone. No action required beyond routine maintenance completed overnight. A clerk had decided the minute belonged to housekeeping, not myth. He respects the desire for tidy endings and writes housekeeping theory asserted in his own plain hand. He replaces the drafts and closes the tray as if lowering a lid on talk. In rooms like this, unsent papers are weather vanes. They twitch before anyone outside feels the wind. The vane has already swung the fascia flat and stilled the vents sing. He can't fault the choices, he can only mark that the minute earned them. He stacks his folders, ledger, turnstile, reel, notebooks, plant, wires, witness slips, near miss, lost property, drafts, and squares the corners until the pile looks like certainty. It isn't. He writes the sentence he keeps circling, then leaves a fingernail of white after it. At 1812, the station produced a second tone because its own parts asked each other a question. What the question was, Brass cannot answer. He turns the lamp off and lets the minute recede to paper, where it behaves. He lays a blank card beside the neat stack and writes 4 small words at the top. Air, edge, wire, count. Under each, he copies the plainest sentence from its file. Air, vent steady, breath can sing. Edge, fascia loose, bottle note. Wire, tap felt on bell box, no code. Count. Exit B+1, no jam found. He draws no arrows this time, only lets the words sit like corners of a frame that doesn't insist on a picture. He opens the ledger again to the entry that started him. 1812. Downline local, signal given. The carré whispers double tone in a different hand. He places the washer sleeve on that line and the witness card that says not ours above it. The pile of paper looks like a small stage set, props where a voice should be. The minute has behaved like a person at the edge of a conversation, answering without being asked to speak. He tests the other explanation the one buildings prefer. A held evening with rain. A vent cracked half and a lip that hummed. A wire that shivered enough to tick wood. a washer that kissed a pal and slid away. 4 small, ordinary things, each with a little voice of its own, aligning for 60 seconds and then parting like weather. He writes concurrence of nuisances and underlines the lack of romance. He tries on the story in words a clerk would let out of the room. During a weather hold, plant noise and minor mechanical conditions produced a tone resembling a whistle. No movement occurred. True as far as it goes, he thinks, and false where it matters, because the tone did not simply resemble. It arrived on cue after attention and before absence, the way a colleague might say, "right," without being asked. He writes timed reply and leaves the page open. He returns to the film's 2 seconds, the clear cut, the tired answer, and the station master's head tilting a degree toward the soft sound. He arranges the human marks around it, the boy who lost count, the chip steam that kinked, the porter's bottle, the blue coats, not ours. The minute did not scare anyone. It did not raise a lever or a voice. It only caused a room full of practiced bodies to lean a fraction toward an extra breath. He closes his eyes and walks the platform once more in his head at normal speed. Attention, breath, stillness, the small tremor through timber, a register dreaming of +1, a washer cooling on tile, in that order with nothing skipped. When he opens his eyes, he writes the sentence he trusts most because it is neither theory nor ghost story. A held platform heard itself answer. He copies the dates and boxes the weather, as if one day someone will hold this card against another wet Thursday and feel the same draft along the fascia, the same slight give in a wire, the same patience in a crowd, and be ready to call the tone by its right size. Not a clearance, not a warning, only the building saying, "I heard you" once, and then going quiet. He tucks the card at the very front of the file where a future hand will find it first. Then he turns the lamp down, sets the clicker face up at 099 like an almost smile, and leaves platform 9 to its ordinary catechism, bells that ring properly, levers that mind their law, and 1 minute in week 44 that keeps the room a touch more attentive than it was before. He returns a week later without telling anyone, choosing a day with the same grey promise, wet by noon, wind from the same quarter. He brings only a pocket watch, a stub pencil, and a scrap with 4 words folded inside: air, edge, wire, count. The fascia is still flat. The vent now keeps its breath to itself. The turnstile has a new felt sweep under its hub. He is not here to catch the old minute. He is here to see what the station does when it is denied its own habits. At 1809 he stands under the clock where the cameraman once stood. The leverman's bell makes its clean catechism. Attention, line clear, train on line. No holds tonight. The timetable is pleased with itself. The crowd forms its normal V's and lanes. He writes, "No artificial stillness" in small letters, because the last time a hold hushed the room and gave air and edge permission to talk. He walks to exit B and watches the register through glass while bodies turn the arm. The wheels tick and stop without quiver. He flicks his thumbnail on the nickel hub when no one is looking. The felt eats the tiny after-tremor he loved and feared. A porter catches his eye and smiles the small, correct smile of men who have seen odd things filed as ordinary and prefer them that way. Back at 9, he closes his eyes just before the 1812 departure and listens for the room that had once leaned. The guard gives 2 shorts in the right way. The engine answers with metal he knows by heart. Between those tidy sounds, the space is room tone only. Wet wool, shoe leather, the patient exhale of hot pipes cooling. He writes no reply and feels both relief and loss, like finding an old skip in a record fixed and missing it anyway. He takes the service stair to the boiler corridor and places his palm on the cowl. Warm, steady, voiceless. He cracks it a fraction more than the rounds card would like, blows across the slit, and hears nothing but his own foolishness. He resets it and writes "Vent disciplined" because discipline is what the building has chosen for itself since week 44. He stops by the hut and asks the leverman a question he frames as curiosity. Did the bell ever tick that week after repairs? The man shrugs the practiced shrug. Wood moves, he says again, then adds a line he hadn't last time. Less so when they weatherproofed the box. He writes that down, then writes underneath without comment. They took some talk out of the timber. He finishes under the fascia, where 4 bright tacks shine like teeth in the last light. He holds the stub pencil to the lip and lets a drop roll to its point, waiting to see whether the edge will sing to a small invitation. The drop falls, the pencil point trembles a hair, and nothing answers. He is not disappointed. He writes the sentence the test wanted. Without looseness, the station keeps its breath to itself. On the concourse, a pram wheel catches for a second at the platform. Join, again, the small choreography, hand, lift, nod, thanks. He remembers the near-miss line from the maroon ledger and copies it with today's time, not because it's new, but because keeping the station honest means writing its sameness as faithfully as its strangeness. He folds the scrap with the 4 words back into his coat and gives the room one last count to 10. It gives him only what he asked, 10, and then a train leaving on time. He drafts the official paragraph first, the kind that will live in a folder no one opens unless a new clerk gets curious. During a scheduled weather hold at 1812, week 44, a non-issue tone resembling a whistle was heard on platform 9. No signals were cleared, no stock moved. Subsequent maintenance, securing fascia, servicing vent, renewing turnstile hub felt, weatherproofing bellbox timber, prevented recurrence, no hazard observed. He reads it aloud once. It fits. It also leaves the minute outside in the rain. He starts a second page headed Working Notes, the one a future hand may find and keep or bin. He copies the 4 words he has carried around like coins: air, edge, wire, count. Under each he adds the smallest witness that still feels like fact. Vent, steady, but capable of voice. Fascia lip could bottle a tone. Timber felt a tap without code. Exit B recorded +1, then let it go. He draws a square around the set and refuses arrows. He adds human terms because buildings tell their truths through people first. Station master's head tilted 1 degree towards second tone. Boy lost count of rivets. Blue coat said not ours. Chip steam kinked. He underlines none of it. The sum of small tilts is why he is writing at all. He sketches a plan of 9 the way he remembers it in motion, a thin line from the vent to the fascia lip, a dotted line from wire run to bell timber, a circle at exit B, a tiny X on the rail where chalk once lived, and a soft bracket around the crowd, space between the kiosk and the pillar where the cameraman stood. He writes conversation zone in the bracket and almost deletes it, then leaves it because it is the closest he can get to naming what happened. He writes 2 sentences he will let the file keep. The first belongs to works. Repairs removed looseness that allowed plant and structure to speak to each other. The second belongs to everyone else. During holds, staff should treat any unfamiliar reply between attention and release as weather, not clearance. He sets a period like a wait. He closes his pen and listens to the room the way he did on the minute. Nothing dramatic, only the persistent domestic sound stations make when no one is asking them to prove they're alive. He imagines the second tone again, not as a ghost, but as a courtesy. An old building saying, "I heard you," because the cue invited an answer, and the parts happen to be in agreement for once. He slips the washer sleeve into a small envelope marked adjacent, tucks the porter's bottle note beneath it, and clips both to the back of the working page. He writes, in pencil, small enough to vanish with one careless thumb, "If it returns, start here." He files the official paragraph where officials will look, the working notes where he would, and leaves a square of white at the very front of the folder, on purpose, a blank for the thing that won't be pinned. Then he sets the brass clicker face up again at zone 99, turns the lamp down, and walks the length of platform 9 once, counting to 10 because someone once did, before letting the station keep its ordinary evening, its catechism of levers and bells, and one held minute that learned to answer and then sensibly forgot how. He isn't there for this part. Years pass, timetables change their fonts, a new logo arrives that looks like speed drawn with a ruler. When Works finally strips platform 9 for a winter renovation, the minutes he kept turn back into hardware. The foreman's daily sheet records the small archaeology of stations: lift fascia, replace run. Renew bell box timber. Reseat chair keys along 9, re-oil. The language is still plain, but the paper smells of fresh solvent instead of old tea. The carpenter pries the bell box off its tired plank and writes, half amused, half proud, "Found penny under bracket, 1959, left in place." Beneath that line, smaller, "Wire groove polished bright where it kissed wood." He circles "kissed," a tradesman's word, then leaves it because it is exactly right. The groove keeps no secrets, it only shows attention spent over years. Up at the fascia, a tinsmith slides a hand under the old lip and finds, wedged like a bookmark, a sliver of metal cut to quiet the edge. Somebody's field fix that predated the 4 bright tacks. He notes it on the tag, "Shim present, homemade." He bends it once and listens. Even in his palm, the edge wants to answer a breath with the faintest nothing of a note. He grins at the foolishness of trying it a second time and pockets the instinct. The shim goes to the scrap bucket with a dozen cousins that once taught the roof to talk in squalls. At the turnstile, an apprentice strips the hub to change the felt sweep. In the tray beneath, among fluff the colour of damp coin, sits a thin washer, twin to the one that lived a while in the jelly jar. He logs it because the form says to log everything. Washer recovered, 1-2, worn one side. The powel is clean, the wheels click in rehearsal, content with the future. He drops the washer into a tin marked MISC. It makes the same low, undecided sound on landing that the other made when spun on a desk. The boiler corridor loses its draft when they fit a new cowl with a throat that refuses music. The fitter writes "no sing at half" with clear, tidy satisfaction. A younger hand adds a smile in pencil, then erases it. The corridor will smell like paint for a week, then go back to rope and steam, the same catechism, a quieter choir. Someone has to clear the little drawer labelled "lost," "found," before it's reinstalled. The porter who once wrote about the bottle has long since retired. Another man tips the jelly jar into a paper cup and counts the smalls for a fresh start. Tokens, 2, eyelets, 2, washer, 1. He frowns at the washer as if it might be an omen, then shrugs and moves it to a labelled tin where omens are not allowed. Down on the rail, a young ganger, new to week 44 as a number, dabs fresh paint where chalk once X'd the web. He drives a chair key home with 2 clean taps. The sound from iron is not a note, but a verdict. He grins at his mate and says, "That's us then," and writes the time on his card, because the foreman likes to see times. In the clerk's room, a box marked Arch, Cheech Misk, fills with papers culled during the tidy, duplicate memos, old weekly sheets, a near-miss book with 3 blank pages left and 5 small stories in the margin. A junior clerk reads the draft that was never sent, unfamiliar sounds may occur, and smiles at the ambition of calming weather with sentences. He keeps it, not because it will be used, but because it feels like the station talking about itself out loud. At the very bottom of the box, between an onion skin carbon and a blotter sheet, a thin card slips free when the junior lifts too fast. 4 words live at its top in a hand he does not know. Air, edge, wire, count. There are no arrows, only corners. He turns the card over and finds a small bracket labelled Conversation Zone. He doesn't understand it, he understands enough to like it. He tucks the card into the front of the finished file without a comment, because archives are built as much by kindness as by rules. When the platforms reopen, the minute that once refused to sit still is now embedded in fresh timber and tight tin and felt that eats tremors. At 18:12 on a wet Thursday, attention sounds like it should. Release follows when it should. Nothing answers that doesn't carry a badge. People still lean toward the speaker grill out of habit. A pram wheel still catches at a join and is lifted, nodded, thanked. The station master's successor wears a different hat and checks a different watch. He taps its glass anyway because that gesture belongs to the building more than to the man. And somewhere in a drawer that smells of brown paper and dust, a washer sits next to a slip that says adjacent, and a card with 4 small words waits at the front of a file so the next curious hand won't have to invent its corners. The station has kept its breath to itself mostly, but on some cold evenings, if wind takes the long way round the fascia and wood remembers it can move, the room seems to hold itself a fraction quieter at 18:12, as if listening for a reply it has decided sensibly not to give. Years later, when the logo has changed again and tickets print in a softer grey, a junior planner sits over the autumn timetable with a pencil and a tin of erasers. He is told to add clarity where people gather and wait. He is not told any stories. He learns the station by its paperweight, departure grids, connection notes, platform assignments that move like chess. On his second week, he inherits a folder labelled 9 Misc. The first page is a sober memo about crowd lanes. The second is a photocopy of the working notes a hand once titled with 4 small words: air, edge, wire, count. He reads without ceremony. The card's corners are rounded by years, no arrows, only the square around a space marked Conversation Zone. The phrase makes him smile in the way dull rooms are allowed. He is not sure why the smile feels careful. He tucks the card back and keeps reading. The planner's job is to add a footnote to the public leaflet for wet days, something bland about patience and holds. He drafts 3 versions that say the same thing with different shoes. None fit. He goes downstairs to look at the space that will receive his sentence. Platform 9 wears its repairs like it was made that way. Fascia flat, bell box timber tight, felt quiet under the turnstile hub. The air smells of steel and bread again. A school group knots near the kiosk. A porter shunts them into 2 neat ropes with a palm and a word. At 18:05 the bell catechism starts for a local. He listens from the pillar the cameraman once loved. Attention, line clear, train on line. He writes the codes in tiny letters in his notebook because it helps to copy what you don't yet speak. He thinks about the public footnote waiting upstairs, about during inclement weather, and your patience is appreciated. Sentences that pass through rooms without touching them. He closes the notebook. He asks the leverman, an older man with a soft way of standing, what he should tell people about holds. The man shrugs the maintenance shrug. "Tell them we'll start them when it's time," he says. "Tell them the bell knows before we do." The planner writes bell knows and underlines it it, not because he believes in mystique, but because the phrase is true in a plain way. The code arrives first, the arm follows, the train moves. Back in the office, he lays his pencil over the leaflet draft and writes a quieter line under the Times, where eyes only fall if they are already calm. It is not a rule, it is a courtesy to a room. If you hear a short note during a hold, he writes, please wait for the second that means go. He pauses, adds, staff will signal, the building sometimes answers. He nearly deletes the last clause. He leaves it and sets the pencil aside. He brings the draft to his supervisor, a woman who reads fast and keeps a steady hand on budgets. Her eyes catch on the small clause. She taps the paper. The building doesn't answer, she says, patient, not unkind. We answer, keep it simple. He nods, makes a neat line through the words, and prints the practical version. Please wait for staff signals. He does not argue. He doesn't need the clause to be printed to keep it. Before he files the final, he returns to 9 MISC and slips a copy of the plain leaflet behind the old card. On the card's blank front, he adds today's date and one small line that will not leave a bruise on anyone's day. Public, told to wait for the second. He initials the corner because people forget who wrote soft things first. That evening, he walks the concourse before going home. The platform does what platforms do. A pram wheel sticks and lifts. A paper folds and stays there, waiting. At 18:12, a held train receives its attention cut and holds, like it should. No reply follows. He counts 10 in his head anyway, habit from a story he read without being told to care, and smiles when the starter clears and the proper 2 short notes carry the room forward. He passes exit B. The porter has nested a fresh tray under the arm to catch small metal before it wanders. The jelly jar on the shelf holds 3 eyelets and 2 bus tokens and nothing that once shaped a minute. He feels no loss. The station has chosen tidy over talk, and tidy keeps people safe. On his way out, he pauses at the pillar near the kiosk and looks across the old conversation zone. A new poster sits where the cameraman once framed the clock. A soft notice about umbrellas and platform edges, nothing anyone will quote. He adds a private footnote to himself, unwritten, in wet air, in old buildings, listen for courtesy. It may not be a rule, it helps you keep them. Upstairs, he files the leaflet to print and the card back in its folder, corners squared. Then he turns off his desk lamp and checks his watch against the wall clock, because that small tap on glass belongs to the building, not to a generation. The bell knows before they do, the room knows when the bell answers. People move when asked. And in a drawer that no one opens unless they are already curious, a hand from another week leaves 4 words at the front, so the next one doesn't have to invent the corners again. He books the little sound room on a Tuesday, the kind with egg crate foam and a table that wobbles if you breathe wrong, and carries the grey spool like a saucer. The digitizer hums politely. A young technician with clean sleeves threads the leader and checks levels, reminding him that tapes don't remember feelings, only magnetism. He nods and says nothing about minutes that lean. They run the reel once with meters up and lights low. The platform comes back as soft weather, shoes brushed in cloth, paper folding, a voice that learned steadiness at a switchboard. At 18:10 the hold arrives, polite, absolute. At 18:12 the room performs its tiny play again, one clean attention cut, a single breath of crowd, and then the stray note, late and thin, the way air talks when it finds an edge it didn't know it wanted. The technician marks timestamps on a pad. Second event here, she says, neutral as a ruler, and pulls the segment into a window that paints sound as colour. The whistle he knows glows as a narrow band, proud and straight. The reply smears below it, a shaded bruise that wavers a fraction like a hand not built for metal. She taps the screen. "Not a match for your device," she says. "Could be air on something." He writes, "air on something," even though the file already owns those words in other rooms. They isolate the second tone and let the rest of the platform fall away. Alone, it sounds smaller, almost shy, attack slow, decay untidy, the center sagging a hair the way tin sags when it's asked to sing. She runs a pitch trace and frowns kindly. "Between E and F," she says, surprised to be saying letters to a stranger. He remembers the pencil scale inside the spare notebook, G marked issue, F marked old, and does not tell her. He only underlines between. They check for coincidences that make clerks sleep better. A cough on the second? None. A footfall that aligns? Only the ordinary shuffle. A relay click. Quiet. She toggles the phase, looks for echoes that would tell him a wall answered itself. The trace stays unflattered by tricks. "It's just there," she says. And he likes the way "just" does not try to make the sound smaller than itself. He asks her to print the strip around the minute, 5 seconds before, 5 after. The issues cut stand straight, the smear answers in its late, polite way. On paper, the conversation looks tidy, almost domestic. A doorbell pressed, a voice from the kitchen saying, without stopping what it's doing. He writes, polite, and then crosses it out. Buildings don't mind manners, they mind loads. As the machine winds down, he asks her what she will name the file. She is a technician. She names things so they can be found later. 1974 platform hold WA1812.WAV, she says, fingers already moving. He nods. Her label will make sense to anyone who has never counted to 10 under a clock in a wet room. He asks for a copy and slips it into a folder that already knows its corners. On the way out, the corridor smells of warm plastic and a coffee someone forgot. He plays the minute once more in headphones to be sure the speakers weren't flattering his memory. The cut is still clean. The reply is still human by accident. The space between them is still the exact size of a breath that belongs to no one and to the room. He adds one small sentence to the working notes because it fits without pretending to prove anything. Digital transfer confirms. Reply persists when heard alone. He files the printout behind the card with 4 words, leaves the headphones coiled neatly for the next person, and walks past the poster about umbrellas and edges. At the top of the stairs, he taps his watch against the rail. Habit, not need, and listens to the banister answer with the dull, honest note wood makes when it is tight and content. The station keeps its breath to itself. The minute keeps saying what it said. He writes 3 polite inquiries on thin paper and posts them to places that keep similar minutes. A coastal terminus with a habit of fog, a market town junction with old timber in its bones, and a big city concourse where holds sound different because voices do. He asks for nothing dramatic, only whether anyone has logged a reply to attention during a hold and what the building was doing when it happened. The coastal terminus sends a photocopy that smells faintly of toner and salt. Winter 69, the superintendent notes in blue pen. Sea mist in sheds, roof louvre loose. Attention given for test, second tone heard from vent lathes. A fitter has underlined louvre and added sang when cracked, silenced when wedged. Beside the underline, a small arrow points to the word wedged, as if to say the story ended there on purpose. The market town junction replies with a postcard, a picture of geese on water that does not belong to rail. On the back, a guard's hand writes, "We call it a here. Old downpipe at Bay 2. Only speaks when the sluice sticks and the wind's from the hill. First noticed during a fog hold. Nobody moved. We fixed the sluice." He copies, "We fixed the sluice," because it sounds like a blessing. and a policy at once. The big city concourse sends a bundle, 2 near-miss entries, 1 plant diagram, and a half-irritated memo from long ago. Staff to disregard extraneous tones from air handling during stop-and-hold events, it says, then softens in the second paragraph. Remind public, wait for second note. In the margin, someone has penciled a quiet confession. Building occasionally answers, not ours. He underlines, not ours, and lets the echo travel back to 9. He lays all 3 on the desk with his own file. The common nouns line up without needing arrows: vent, louvre, downpipe, roof. The verbs do what verbs should in places that mind their law: wedged, fixed, silenced, reminded. He writes a sentence he likes for its dullness. Other rooms have answered attention with air when looseness and weather agreed. Other rooms ended the talk by tightening what could talk. One letter takes longer, the kind written in an old guard's patient script, posted from a smaller house with a view of allotments. We used to keep an extra whistle in the drawer that never went out, the man writes. Not for use, just to remember the shape of a sound. When the roof sang, I'd touch the drawer. Didn't blow, helped anyway. He copies the line and does not argue with its superstition. Tact belongs to platforms as surely as codes do. He adds a small chart to his working notes, 4 columns headed air, edge, wire, count, and a new row labelled elsewhere. Under air, he writes mist, fog, boil. Under edge, louvre, lip, pipe. Under wire, nothing, only a dash. Not every station keeps its nerves as near to timber. Under count, he leaves the box open. The +1 at exit B still feels like a local accent. He drafts one more unsent paragraph for his tray, just to see how it reads. When the first short note steadies a room, old buildings sometimes answer out of courtesy, not authority. Treat the reply as weather unless the second, issued note follows. He sets his pen down, hears the admonition in his supervisor's voice about buildings not answering, and files the paragraph where such sentences live, behind the practical ones for hands that already know what they're looking for. At the end of the day, he walks 9 once, not to listen for romance, but to check felt and timber and the cowl's decent silence. The bell gives attention for a late connection. The room leans the way rooms do when a cue is offered. No reply arrives. He thinks of the postcard geese, the wedged louvre, the drawer with a whistle that never leaves. Then he taps the watch glass, habit more than need, and writes the only line that seems to travel well between rooms. Wait for the second. He writes the smallest page he can get away with and folds it twice so it fits under a spare whistle in the hut drawer. The title is not a title, it is a courtesy. If wet. Beneath it, no theory. Only steps a tired person can follow with one hand on a lever. At attention, listen once and write the time. If a thin reply comes with a hold in force, look at the arm, do not move it. Wait for the second that means go. If it doesn't come, treat the room as weather. Tell the platform what they already know. We start when the bell says we do. He adds a line in plain speech because huts keep plain speech better than slogans. Buildings talk when loose, we keep them tight. When they still talk, we stay polite and still. He tucks the note under the whistle and closes the drawer so it rides there with the weight of metal, not as a rule, as a habit. Downstairs, he gives the same idea to guards without paper. If you hear anything that sounds like help during a hold, he says, call it wind until the starter clears. J.W. nods because he already lives that way. A younger relief repeats it back to fix it in his mouth. Wind until clear. He smiles. Good enough. He walks a last circuit of 9 before the rush. The fascia lip sits flat. The cowl breathes without voice. The bell box timber is new and quiet. Exit B's hub makes a kind, dull sound that felt makes when it is doing its job. He presses his palm to a pulley housing and feels no tick, only the patient weight of wire. He writes quiet because kept and pockets the card that has carried 4 words long enough. A shower sweeps the glass for 3 minutes. The leverman gives attention for a late connection and holds the way law asks. The room leans the way people do when someone clearing their throat means listen. No reply comes. The platform waits. The second note arrives. The starter comes off. The car doors pull shut like lids on a tidy box. Movement feels earned, not argued. At the kiosk, the porter who once wrote bottle wipes a line of rain off the counter with the side of his hand and watches the crowd fold into lanes that fit their day. He does not miss the extra breath. He misses the old roof in the way men miss a creak in a stair, fondly, not usefully. He taps the counter twice out of habit and turns to change a ribbon in the stamp machine. Back in the hut, the folded page under the spare whistle warms to the room and stops wanting to spring open. It will be found when it is needed, or never, which is also a kind of success. The drawer closes with the soft report of wood that fits wood. Outside, the clock makes an honest minute. Inside, the bell knows before they do. And when a held room hears itself answer again someday, the steps are short enough to keep everyone still until the right sound arrives. He leaves the folder squared and the lamp low, but the room does not let go of him as quickly as offices think they can. Platforms keep a person by their habits, the way wood remembers knuckles, the way tin remembers wind. He walks once more under the fascia that no longer sings and counts a steady 10 beneath the clock without making a ceremony of it. Attention is given, the room leans, nothing answers that shouldn't. The second note arrives and gathers everyone forward like a hand. He inventories what remains when stories are done with spectacle. A vent that can breathe without voice because someone tightened a throat. A lip that learned to keep quiet because 4 bright tacks said please. A wire run that carries force and not gossip. A hub that eats tremors with felt and good manners. A bell box whose timber now prefers to be wood and not instrument. Each repair is ordinary. Together they say the building was listened to and then treated kindly. He inventories the softer pieces too because they decide how minutes feel. A porter who still calls a thin sound a bottle when weather turns and grins at the memory. A guard who writes wind until clear on the inside cover of a fresh pocketbook and means it. A leverman who taps the box twice before his first code of the evening, not for luck, just to feel the day's stiffness in the grain. None of it is policy. All of it keeps people still until it is time to move. He writes one last line for himself and does not file it where budgets live. When attention steadies a room, old buildings may want to agree once, let them want, wait for the second. It is not a rule and not a romance. It is a sentence someone can hold in their head at 1812 when breath and edge and wire remember each other for a second and consider singing. He sets the brass clicker face up at 100 at last, not because a body passed, but because the work passed through its count and found its way out. The number sits clean, not triumphant. He closes the drawer where the folded page sleeps under the spare whistle and leaves the card with 4 small words at the very front of the file so the next hand won't have to invent its corners. On his way down the concourse, a pram wheel ticks at the platform join and lifts with the same small choreography every ledger learns to love. Hand, tilt, nod, thanks. The bell knows before they do. The room knows when the bell answers. People go when asked. And at 9 in wet weather or clear, the minute that once refused to sit still now lives as a courtesy in the air, felt more than heard, a quiet agreement between attention and release that says, as softly as a building can, we are ready when you are. He leaves a single card at the very front of the file for anyone who opens it in a hurry, the same 4 words, set wider than before so a thumb can't miss them. Air, edge, wire, count. Under each, he writes one sentence that does not ask to be believed, only used. Air, breath sources sing when given a slit, shut the slit. Edge, loose lips make notes, make lips tight. Wire, nerves carry force and rumour, keep them dry and clear of wood. Count, registers dream of +1, keep small metal out of mechanisms. He adds a 5th line that belongs to people more than plant. Wait for the second. No italics, no box. Just the habit that turned a restless minute into a quiet one. He copies 3 small courtesies below, the kind that live longer than memos. At attention, listen once and write the time. If a thin reply comes during a hold, call it weather and stay still. Tell the room what it already knows. We go when the bell does. He does not argue with anyone who prefers the simpler version taped to the public leaflet. He only leaves these lines where curious hands will find them first, so that a wet Thursday years from now can inherit practice instead of doubt. On the back of the card, he sketches the square around the space the cameraman once loved and labels it small, conversation zone. Not sacred, just the place where breath, edge, wire, and count once agreed to answer attention with a tired little note that meant nothing and asked nothing except to be recognized. He closes the folder and lets the building keep its ordinary catechism, bells that lead, levers that mind, wheels that click and stop without quiver. The porter taps the counter twice before the rush because wood remembers knuckles. The guard writes wind until clear on a fresh inside cover. The leverman tells a trainee without drama, the bell knows before we do, at 18:12 on a wet day, that resembles the stubborn one, a short, clean cut steadies the room. Nothing answers that shouldn't. The second arrives and gathers the crowd forward like a nod fulfilled. Somewhere beneath felt and timber, air wants to sing and chooses not to. The station has learned the courtesy. The card waits at the front, so the next minute doesn't have to. They give the trainee the quiet shift, the hour when the concourse smells like wet stone and mop water, and pair him with J.W., who wears routine like a good coat. The folder with the 4 small words stays upstairs. Downstairs, practice is taught by nods and small sentences. J.W. taps the bell box timber twice, not for luck, just to feel the day's stiffness. Wood moves, he says, and the trainee repeats it under his breath as if it were a platform prayer. They walk 9 together the way a line is read, left to right, back to front, checking the vent's polite breath, the fascia's flat lip, the pulley housings where wire prefers to be a nerve and not a rumour. J.W. tells him what every old room teaches, that attention is not a siren but a courtesy, that people lean toward sound the way plants lean toward light, and that levers mind law better than stories do. The trainee nods, eyes tracing the square of space between the kiosk and the pillar without knowing he has inherited a shape. At 18:08 the catechism begins. 1 beat for attention, 2 pause 1 for is line clear, 2 pause 2 for line clear. J.W. lets him answer the codes, his hand steady on brass, his pencil neater than it will ever be again. We start them when it's time, J.W. says, and the trainee hears, tucked inside the words, the unsent clause older men sometimes keep. The building sometimes answers. The schedule asks for a short hold, a drizzle-thin pause to stitch a late connection into the weave. The trainee gives the attention cut, clean and small, looks down the line to be sure the starter sleeps, and waits the way he has been told to wait, still. The room leans, as rooms always do. A newspaper creases, someone with a pram turns the wheel with 2 fingers, and a thank you nod ready for whoever earns it. Nothing improper arrives. The second note, issued and rightful, carries the room forward on command. The trainee feels the relief of correctness settle into his shoulders. J.W. lets the minute breathe and then speaks the rule the drawer upstairs keeps on paper. If you ever hear a thin answer between the two, he says, call it weather. Wait for the second. The trainee repeats it as a sentence to carry in a pocket. Weather until second. Later, when the concourse empties to echoes, J.W. shows him Exit B's hub, and the wave felt eats tremors before they become stories. He rolls the arm once with the inspector's key and holds the silence up like a specimen. Quieter than you think, he says. Quieter is the point. In the jelly jar on the shelf are 2 eyelets and a token, and no washer. The trainee does not know that is a kind of happy ending. They climb to the hut and sit with the frame. J.W. tells him about bells that tick without ringing when rain and timber confer, about roofs that once sang like bottles until men with tacks gave them manners, about vents that prefer to breathe without voice when asked nicely. None of it arrives as myth, it arrives as housekeeping. The trainee writes 3 words on the inside cover of his pocketbook. Listen, still, second. And underlines second because he likes how it ends the sentence. Before they part, J.W. points at the clock and makes him count to 10 in a held minute that contains nothing more than steam and patience. The trainee feels foolish and then, quietly, right-sized. He understands that platforms are made of iron and time, but lived in by small courtesies, the way a porter's knuckles talk to wood, the way a leverman's pencil makes witness, the way a crowd agrees to wait when told in the right order. On his way out, the trainee pauses by the pillar where a cameraman once loved the angle. He cannot name why the space feels arranged. He only notes that the building seems to stand a fraction straighter when attention is given, as if pleased to be addressed properly. He taps his watch glass against the rail without thinking, and hears the dull, honest note wood makes when it is tight and content. The habit will stay. Upstairs, the card with 4 corners waits at the front of a file the trainee will not open for years. Downstairs, he carries the same corners in simpler words. If wet, listen once, stay still, wait for the second, call the rest weather. The room accepts the lesson without comment, the way old rooms do when they have been spoken to in their own language. He walks the line one more time before a forecasted front, paper saying, showers by evening, wind swinging north. The concourse wears the dull shine of a room that knows what wet brings. He is not hunting a mystery, he is checking hinges. The fascia lip sits flat, 4 bright tacks where they should be. He presses a thumb to the edge and feels only wood behind metal. No give, no offer. Good, he says to no one. At exit B, the hub answers his palm with Felt's kind, dull reply. The register wheels show an honest count. He nudges the arm with the inspector's key and waits for the afterthought tremor that once made a story out of a washer. Nothing follows. A porter has lined the floor tray with fresh newspaper and written a small joke in pencil along the edge. No pulps or chins. He smiles, leaves it. Some sentences do their best work as a smile. Up in the hut, he rubs a rag along the bell-box timber and checks the screws that learn to stay proud of the grain, not inside it. The leverman taps once, then twice, habit, not ritual, and the bell answers properly to both. The wire run beneath the platform lies quiet over its pulleys, a neat string that carries force and refuses gossip. He writes 2 words on his card and underlines neither. Dry, tight. He climbs the boiler corridor and listens to the cowl breathe. Heat moves, it does not speak. He cracks the relief a quarter, then sets it back where the rounds card likes it. The throat holds its voice like a man choosing not to hum. He notes the weather, damp air, light wind, because damp and wind once invited a room to answer a question it hadn't been asked. He stands at the pillar the cameraman loved and traces the old conversation zone with his eyes. Nothing makes a ceremony of itself. People drift and arrange, practicing the small courtesies that keep edges clean, a pram guided, a bag pulled closer, a half step back from the yellow line because attention turns rooms into listeners. The clock hands move with their blunt honesty toward the minute he knows too well. At 18:10, attention is given for a short hold to fetch a late connection. The leverman's code answers down the wire. The starter stays where law places it. The room leans into the quiet like it always does when a single note asks for patience. He watches faces tilt a degree toward the speaker grill, watches shoulders find stillness that isn't stiff. He writes steady and leaves the pencil down. At 18:12, the first small cut steadies the rim of the crowd, crisp, issued, familiar. He listens for anything thin and breath-frayed to follow and finds only room tone. The soft exhale of pipes, shoe leather adjusting, the paper sound of coats. He counts to 10 out of respect for the old minute. Numbers arrive, untroubled. The second note comes on time. The starter lifts. The train glides with a movement that feels like a sentence completed. He checks himself for disappointment and finds none. The work did what work is supposed to do, turned talk into quiet. He writes a sentence on the back of his card because it feels like the last one this file needs. Kept ready beats kept curious. He does not mean never listen, he means listen and keep it tight so that listening is simple. On his way past exit B, he looks down into the tray. 2 eyelets, 1 bus token, a paperclip bent into a fish. He adds the clip to the jelly jar and taps the hub once with his knuckle. Felt eats the tap before it can become a rumour. He likes that, how some jobs end not with a fix, but with a habit that keeps fixes from being needed. He pauses under the fascia and lets a small squall cross the glass. The lip stays quiet, the cowl breathes without voice, the pulley housings do not twitch. He imagines the old minute anyway, not as a ghost, but as a courtesy the building offered when looseness and weather lined up like 2 words that rhyme by accident. He nods once, thanks the room under his breath for choosing tidy. He files the card with 4 small words at the very front again, corners squared so a hurried thumb cannot miss them, and closes the drawer that holds the folded "if wet." The bell knows before they do. Rooms know when the bell answers. People go when asked. If a thin answer ever visits again between attention and release, the steps are short enough to keep everyone still. If it doesn't, the quiet is its own proof that the building was listened to and kept ready for rain. He signs the bottom of the working notes with a date that will mean nothing to anyone who isn't counting Thursdays, and tucks the folder into the drawer that always sticks on first pull. The lamp goes low. The room returns to its ordinary catechism. Wood without talk, air without song, wire without rumour. He waits a beat longer than he needs to, the way a person does when they're listening for a thing that used to arrive, and now, properly, does not. Years add their quiet. Paper yellows at the corners. A new paint line straightens the concourse. A poster about umbrellas gives way to one about phones. The porter, who called thin sounds bottles, retires with a story he never tells, as a story, only as a shrug that knows what tax can do. JW teaches 2 more trainees to speak the rules softly, weather until second, and hands each a pocketbook with 3 penciled words on the inside cover. Listen still, second. The books fray at the elastics and keep the habit. On a rain-smudged evening that belongs to a newer timetable, a held room receives attention cleanly and does what rooms trained well will do. It leans, then waits. A child with a pram sibling counts to 10 because a parent once did. A blue coat, now a different cut and fabric, tilts their head toward the grill and nods when nothing improper follows. The second note arrives where it should. Doors pull in, the platform breathes out as one. No one writes a line about it. That is success. Upstairs, the file is opened twice in a decade, the first time by a junior who is only looking for a memo template and pauses over a card with 4 words he doesn't need and likes anyway: air, edge, wire, count. He puts it back at the very front out of instinct more than reverence. The second time by an auditor who wants to know why small maintenance lines kept winning budgets on wet weeks. The auditor reads the sentence "repairs removed looseness" that allowed plant and structure to speak to each other and underlines nothing. He approves the spend because tight is cheaper than incident and closes the drawer carefully so the front card stays visible to the next hurried thumb. Down in the hut, the spare whistle's drawer still sticks on humidity and then gives with a wooden sigh. Beneath it, the folded if wet has flattened into the grain so well that it looks like the desk taught itself the words. A relief guard lifting the whistle once on a foggy evening notices the page, reads the 4 short steps and says "right" to no one. The drawer closes with the soft report of wood meeting wood. The rule rides along inside, unchanged by printing or policy, passed hand to hand the way platforms prefer their knowledge to travel. Once during a blowy squall, the fascia lip mutters only in water and stops there. The cowl inhales in its decent way and does not sing. A pulley twitches because pulleys are allowed to move. The bellbox timber stays a listener and not an instrument. Exit B eats a rumour with felt. A washer that might have made a story lives out its useful life holding something proper together 3 buildings away. Nothing reaches for the old rhyme. The minute considers answering, then remembers it has nothing to add. He returns one evening because habits also keep people. He stands at the pillar the cameraman loved and lets the space map itself onto him. Kiosk, bench, 9-car mark, the honest clock. The card upstairs has stopped needing him, the room has not. At 18:10, attention lands like a hand on a shoulder. The room tilts a degree toward patience. He copies nothing. He has long since stopped needing paper to believe what tight work can do. The starter sleeps as law asks. At 18:12, the first small cut steadies the rim. No reply comes that doesn't carry a badge. He counts to 10 because a child once did, because a witness once wrote it in a round hand, because a minute once taught him the size of a breath. The second arrives, the levers speak, the room goes forward like a sentence finishing itself. When the train has gone and the wet has turned the glass into a film of itself, he taps the rail with his watch once, not for luck, for measure, and listens to wood answer in its dull, honest key. On the way out, he pulls the drawer that sticks and checks the front card with a thumb. Air, edge, wire, count. Beneath it, the 5th line that belongs to people. Wait for the second. No arrows, no insistence. Only corners and a courtesy that outlived its mystery. He slides the folder home until the brass tab clicks and knows, in the particular way station people know, that the minute which wouldn't settle has taught the room how to stand still on purpose. Outside, a pram wheel finds the platform join and lifts in that choreography. Every ledger learns to love, hand, tilt, nod, thanks. Inside, bells know before they do. Rooms know when bells answer. People go when asked. And on wet Thursdays, that rhyme with an older one, the building keeps the agreement it made with itself. If attention steadies the room, and breath remembers it could sing, the room will merely listen, and then wait, politely, for the second. He writes a page that isn't a report, not a rule, just handwriting meant for a desk that will someday be someone else's. The page keeps its voice soft because drawers prefer quiet company. At the top, he puts no title, only the date and a line that knows its place. For whoever sits this side of the bell, he lists what a room remembers better than paper. Knuckles teach timber, tap twice. Felt eats rumours, keep it new. Edges like to speak, tack them kindly. Wire prefers force to chatter, lift it clear of wood. He does not dress any of it. He leaves the verbs small and useful. He numbers no steps. He trusts the shape to suggest itself. Attention steadies, the room leans, and then, if the world is behaving, the second arrives and everyone moves like a sentence that has found its period. He writes the only sentence that has survived budgets, memos, and weather. Wait for the second. He adds 3 objects to look for when rain makes minutes longer. A jelly jar half full of harmless smalls, a drawer that sticks and then sighs, a whistle that lives under a folded page and rarely needs air. If those 3 are present, the platform has not forgotten itself. If one is missing, it can be put back. He draws a square around the space the cameraman once loved and labels it small, where rooms listen. No arrows, no claims. Only the suggestion that bodies and breath learn a grammar here. Issued first note, held silence, issued second, and that the building, when kept tight, agrees to speak only the words it must. He writes a courtesy for the public that works whether or not they ever read it. Will start you when it's time. He writes a courtesy for staff that says the same thing in platform language. Bell knows before we do. He places the phrases side by side like 2 clocks set to the same minute. He notes the weather that tends to invite bad manners from good metal, damp that lingers, wind that turns corners, heat that asks to hum. None of it is a ghost. All of it is maintenance. He underlines nothing. The point is not urgency, the point is habit. He records the smallest tells that say a room is ready, pram wheels that lift without fuss, paper that folds and waits, a leverman's pencil that writes times in a hand that doesn't hurry. If these are present, holds behave like breath, held gently, not like argument. He leaves a blank inch at the bottom on purpose. In the lower right corner he writes, "Add what you learn, because rooms keep teaching and drawers should make space for the next sentence." He initials the page in small letters a thumb won't rub away by accident. He tucks the sheet behind the front card with 4 corners, air, edge, wire, count, where a hurried hand will meet it before a meeting does. The drawer closes with Wood's honest key. The bell in the hut waits to be asked, the platform waits to be told, and the file, square at the edges, leans a fraction less on memory because someone took the trouble to leave the minuter margin to live in. He is not young when it comes back to him, not the sound, just the shape. A wet Thursday leans on the glass. The concourse smells like bread and stone. A porter taps wood twice because hands remember faster than rules. At 18:10, attention steadies a room that already knows how to listen. At 18:12, the first clean cut arrives and nothing improper follows. The second comes on time and gathers everyone forward like a period placed where it belongs. He walks to the pillar the cameraman once loved and stands inside the old square he labelled conversation zone when corners still seemed like an argument. The lip above him is quiet by design. The cowl breathes without voice. The wire keeps force and declines rumour. The hub eats the smallest tremor before it learns to call itself a story. None of this is romance. All of it is housekeeping. He opens the folder that outlived its mystery and finds the card with 4 corners gone soft at the edges. Air, edge, wire, count. Beneath it, the 5th line that belongs to people. Wait for the second. He smiles at the lack of arrows. He recognizes his own hand and the restraint he talked himself into. The jelly jar in the drawer holds harmless smalls that never became +1s. The spare whistle rides a folded page that still says, "If wet," in a voice that trusts tired hands. He threads the digitized minute on a phone because that is what the decade asks of truth now, and listens one last time in the egg crate hush of a room that smells like foam and coffee. The issued cut stands, the stray reply lingers thin and breath-frayed, a courtesy from a night when looseness and weather agreed. He writes nothing. The file already owns its sentence. A held platform heard itself answer. He drafts no fresh memo. He adds a single penciled line to the margin for whoever inherits a wet clock and a patient crowd. The building learned, keep it taut. Then he squares the folder, pushes the drawer that sticks until wood gives its honest sigh, and lets the station keep its catechism without him. Bells that know before they do, levers that mind their law, wheels that click and stop without quiver. On his way out, a pram wheel catches at the join and lifts with the small choreography every ledger loved. Hand, tilt, nod, thanks. He taps his watch against the rail out of habit, not need. Wood answers in the dull key of things kept tight on purpose. The minute that would not sit still has become a habit kept lightly. And if, 40 years from now, rain invites breath to remember how edges can sing, the room will simply listen, politely, briefly, and wait for the second. He leaves one last thin strip of paper in the file, not a document so much as a marker. It carries no heading, only a date and a line that knows how to wait. For wet minutes, for rooms that listen, he writes the 4 corners once more, small enough to fit inside a thumbprint, air, edge, wire, count, and lets them sit without arrows. Under them he copies the sentence that outlived every memo, wait for the second. The rest a room already knows if it's been kept tight and spoken to plainly. He adds 3 examples that don't need names, a shed by the sea where a Louvre once sang and was wedged, a market bay where a downpipe answered and was fixed, a big hall where air handling learned its place, and staff learned to say not ours without starting an argument. Across all of them, the habit outlasted the story. He notes what proof looks like when proof is small, a felt hub that swallows a rumour, a bell box that stays listener and not instrument, a fascia that takes rein without opinion, a wire run that carries force and refuses talk. None of it asks for praise, all of it keeps minutes from inventing themselves. He sketches the familiar square around the place where people lean, kiosk, pillar, clock, and writes, quieter than law, where rooms agree to be still. He does not colour the square. He trusts corners to do their quiet work. He writes for whoever comes next with a pencil that doesn't shout. If attention steadies a room and breath remembers it could sing, let it want and let it pass. We start when the bell says we do. It is not a rule, it lands like one. He presses the strip into the front fold so it rides with the 4-corner card, closes the drawer that sticks until wood gives its honest sigh, and leaves the station to its catechism, bells first, levers next, wheels that click and stop without quiver. Outside, a pram wheel finds the join and lifts in the choreography every ledger learned to love. Hand, tilt, nod, thanks. If the wet comes hard in some future autumn, and an old room considers answering attention with a thin, breath-frayed note, the file will be waiting to make that choice simpler. The habit will travel faster than the sound, and the minute that once would not sit still will remain what it became. A courtesy kept lightly, heard mostly as quiet. Section 32. He leaves the clock to mind its own minute and steps back the way a hand leaves paper when the line is finished. The file rides square in the drawer that sticks and then sighs. The spare whistle sleeps on, if wet. The front card keeps its four corners, where a hurried thumb can't miss them. Air, edge, wire, count. The fifth line, wait for the second, does the quiet job it was written for. At 1810, a clean attention steadies the room. People lean by reflex, not by fear. Habits do the lifting. The fascia keeps its counsel, the cowl breathes without voice, the box remains listener and not instrument. Felt eats the small rumours before they remember how to speak. Nothing dramatic asks to be believed. Everything ordinary proves itself. At 1812, the first cut arrives, crisp and issued. The room hears it and holds the way an old building holds a breath it has learned not to spend. No stray answer follows. The second note lands where it belongs. The starter lifts. The doors pull in like lids on a tidy box. Movement feels earned, not argued. The minute that once would not sit still takes its place inside the sentence and becomes a comma, then a period, then nothing anyone needs to name. He stands one last time inside the square he once labelled conversation zone and lets the space keep its grammar without him. A pram wheel finds the join and lifts in the choreography every ledger loved. Hand, tilt, nod, thanks. Up in the hut, a trainee traces 3 penciled words on an inside cover. Listen, still, second, and underlines the last because endings matter. He touches the rail with his watch out of habit and hears would answer in the honest key of things kept tight on purpose. The station keeps its catechism, bells that know before they do, levers that mind law, wheels that click and stop without quiver. The file keeps its corners, the drawer keeps its sigh, the room keeps a courtesy it learned once and never had to forget. If some far Thursday brings wet that wants to sing, the building may remember the shape of a reply and choose not to spend it. And if it does spend a breath, thin, late, harmless, someone will already know how to stand still and let it pass. Attention, silence, release. The second arrives, the story ends where it always meant to, with everyone going when asked. He lets the station settle back into ordinary time and closes the file. For anyone still awake, he invites a small favour. Add a pin to the night map, your city, and the time on your screen. And note the device keeping you company, TV, phone, or earbuds. If this quiet history felt right, he suggests a light subscribe when they're ready, and a gentle, like to help other late listeners, find the room. One last question lingers for the comments. Which detail stayed with them? Air, edge, wire, or count, and why? He leaves the room how he found it, tidy, slow, and ready for sleep. Attention, silence, release. The second arrives, the night continues.